All right, how's everybody doing tonight? Welcome back to Comic Book Team Up with myself, and tonight our guest is Michael Barron, the acclaimed writer, Inkpot winner, Eisner Award winner, creator of Nexus and the Badger, writer of The Flash and The Punisher, creator of great characters. So, Mike has a new book out and he is wanting to talk about it. It's a Leviathan. And as far as I know, it is a combination of Sherlock Holmes and Captain Nemo, and they're trying to save the world. So, Mike, if you want to tell us a little bit about your book right off, and we'll hopefully get into the trailer for it a little later. But what exactly is it about?
Well, I've been on a Sherlock Holmes jag lately. About 2 years ago, I started watching all the Sherlock Holmes TV shows and movies that I could get on the internet. And there's more than anybody can watch in a lifetime. Holmes is probably the most widely recognized fictional character in history. There are 10 times, maybe 100 times more Sherlock Holmes novels since the death of Conan Doyle than he wrote in his lifetime. They call a Sherlock Holmes novel that's not written by Holmes a Sherlock Holmes pastiche. I don't know if that's accurate, but it's a good enough term. And I have been a Holmes fan all my life. I was a member of the Baker Street Irregulars when I was a kid. We'd all get together and talk about Holmes in a stone hut in Shorewood in Madison, Wisconsin. And one day it just said, "Yeah, I want to do a Holmes story." It just popped into my head. And almost simultaneously, I thought of Captain Nemo, uh, which is the wonderful thing about all these Victorian fictional characters. They were all created in the same time frame that it's conceivable that they met each other. And a lot of writers have taken advantage of that fact. Witness the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, but also Philip Jose Farmer, one of my favorite science fiction writers who created the Wold Newton universe, and that was simply a universe where fact and fiction met and they all interacted. Uh, Newton or Farmer would he would cast Mark Twain and Sir Richard Burton in his novels, along with Lord Tiger and Doc Caliban, which were the terms he used to describe Tarzan. Um,
Oh wow!
and
What was the name of this writer?
Lord Tiger and Doc Caliban,
The author
which
who created these books. I got to look this up.
Philip Jose Farmer. I'm going to put it right here in the chat.
Oh, thank you.
And to just let everybody know, there are links in the description for Mike's Twitter and his page where it links to each Fund My Comic, Indiegogo, and Kickstarter for this book that we're talking about.
Thanks, John.
When I was a kid, I was obsessed with Sir Richard Burton. So
I am still obsessed with Sir Richard Burton.
yeah,
Have you seen the movie Mountains of the Moon?
oh yeah. Sober and straight, I watched it. Yeah, are you familiar with Concrete? Paul Chad.
You mean the comic?
Yeah, the comic. Yeah.
Sure.
What's his name? Paul Chadwick. Yeah.
Yeah.
He had an issue where Concrete talked about Sir Richard Burton, and I was like, "Who is this guy?" So I became obsessed with this character for like 2 or 3 years. So there you go. So you just has nothing to do with your book, but thank you for bringing it up. Also, I'm obsessed with Captain Nemo. He's one of my 5 favorite fictional characters of all
Well,
time.
you're going to love this because I
Yeah,
love
I
the
can't wait.
captain too. And the funny thing is that Richard Bonk, the illustrator, by the way, the book is completely illustrated. It's being colored and lettered now. Um, uh, Bonk had been waiting his whole life to draw steampunk. He just didn't know it, but he
Oh,
found out. He found out when he got the script. And when you see the art, your eyes are going to melt. It's just the greatest work of his career, which is something because Richard Bonk is a great artist. He's one of the few artists who's fast and good.
yeah, this
Uh,
looks awesome. You've been
if
on
you
my channel. You showed me some art before. This looks awesome.
if you play that video, you'll get a glimpse of what he's up to in the book.
I can't wait for this. Like I said, Captain Nemo. He's up there with my favorite fictional. Who always seems to get short shafted in movie adaptations. They never get them right.
Well, not this one. Well, it's not a movie adaptation. I thought James Mason was a pretty good
Oh
character.
yes, I forgot James Mason. I was thinking of the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. They got him wrong.
And I don't know if you've seen the trailer for this new TV series, Nemo, but it looks
Yeah,
fantastic.
you played it when you were on my channel. Yeah, that looks pretty accurate. Yeah,
I can't remember. I think it's Fantastic Island is where
Mysterious
I
Island.
remember Mysterious Island,
Oh,
where
I
Captain
love that.
Nemo is in that, and it
I
has
love
terror
that.
birds and everything else in it. That's
It tells you his origin and everything. It's fascinating.
I was thinking of, well, in my Thomas Valiant #2, which I'm doing right now, they're stuck on an island, and I had to pull from that because of the
Oh,
giant terror
great.
birds and
Now I
everything
got to
else.
change another script between you and David Brink. You're gonna be able to write another comic book. You want to play his trailer for him?
Yeah.
Well, sure. Let me just make it a little bigger so that we can see better. Full screen layout. There we go. 1 second.
When a series of shipping disasters points to a mysterious sea monster, Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson leave the comfort of Baker Street and board a freighter where they encounter unexpected betrayal and come face to face with the enigmatic Captain Nemo and his submarine, the Nautilus. As they delve deeper into the case, they uncover a conspiracy involving a Russian Tsar with an airship that rains destruction on unsuspecting cities. With time running out and the world on the brink of war, the heroes must use all their skills and resources to stop a massive conspiracy and prevent global conflict. From Eisner-winning writer Mike Barron and illustrator Richard Bonk, dive into the depths of adventure and unravel the mysteries of the sea with the world's greatest detective in Leviathan. Order now at baroncomics.com.
Very, very nice.
Yeah. Chris Brawley put that together. Chris runs all my campaigns.
I can't wait. Who's your colorist?
Robert Epps.
Yeah, the coloring is outstanding too.
I had a question here. I was just trying to find it. Tony asked, have you ever watched Young Sherlock Holmes?
I watched it a long time ago, Tony, when it first came out, but I can't remember it.
What's the new one with Sherlock Holmes' sister from the girl from Stranger Things?
Yeah, Enola Holmes. It's on Netflix, and Henry Cavill plays Holmes. He's absolutely wasted. He's totally wrong for the part. It's cute. It's enjoyable, but it doesn't have that Sherlock Holmes flavor. If you want to be plunged into the reality of Sherlock Holmes, the way Conan Doyle envisioned him, Jeremy Brett's BBC series is untouched. In my mind, Brett was the best Holmes, followed by Benedict Cumberbatch and Basil Rathbone. They're all great, but so many great actors have played Holmes over the years. Nicole Williamson played him in The 7% Solution. And John Neville played him in A Study in Terror, where Holmes tracks down Jack the Ripper.
Oh, yeah.
I remember that from long ago. I think I watched it as a late movie at one point. So the question I wanted to ask was, I find that most of the modern interpretations of Sherlock Holmes tries to get it, I don't know, into a version of the character that is something extraordinary in a different way, whereas it concerns mental capacity. But I always think of him as simply strictly logical, and the logic is his friend, and logic is how he determines everything else. I don't particularly like the modern versions of him. Which way do you go with the character in your story?
I believe that he suffered from Asperger's syndrome, which is an affliction that prevents close human relationships, but is often compensated for by other skills. And I think that's evident in the stories that Conan Doyle wrote, because there's always the question of was Holmes ever involved with a woman? And that's never answered, and it's never mentioned. In fact, it's all talked about in euphemisms and so forth. Uh, and he had problems relating. As you know, if he wasn't involved with a case, he'd just stay home and shoot up cocaine and play the violin. And it was only when he had a case that he came alive and became himself. In the Benedict Cumberbatch series, Cumberbatch as Holmes says, I'm a high functioning sociopath. I don't think that's correct at all. The sociopath is somebody who doesn't have empathy or care about other people. And I think that Holmes has it, although it's learned behavior on his part, but he does care about people, especially people who are sympathetic, who come to him with a problem through no fault of their own. And he'll go the extra mile to help them. But there's no question that in my mind, that he suffered from Asperger's syndrome.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I noticed you never mentioned the Robert Downey Jr. version. They turned him into like a superhero in that.
I know. Yeah, I love Downey as Iron Man, but that was just silly. And Guy Ritchie is mostly makes silly movies, with the exception of The Covenant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Zacharian has a question here. He says, any hints of Elridge sea gods like dragons or Cthulhu? Because of course you have Captain Nemo, so there's giant sea creatures, obviously. So he's wondering if you're going to go any further with the giant sea creatures. I think.
Well, I have to say that I can't tell you who makes a surprise appearance in the book, but it's going to make your head explode.
There you go.
I honestly think that a lot of people are finding, well, not just steampunk, but historical eras of the past, the way to tell a story right now, just because of the problems with modern society. For myself, I'm writing a series right now called Fade to Blue, which is based in the late 20s, early 30s. And I pull from, things like King Kong and stuff like that, never referencing them directly, but putting in Easter eggs and stuff like that. Do you have any kinds of references to other stories that you might want to include in the future?
Well, you'll see the seeds of other stories in what I wrote, but this is a self-contained story. There's nothing in there that points to intrigue in another zone. But I am thinking about doing another one. It all depends on how well this one does. But if I do another one, it's way down the pike because my pipeline is stuffed with projects for the coming year.
Oh, that's good.
The next one we're going to focus on is Bronze Star 2, and Pat Broderick is deep into illustrating it. And as I've said before, and as people have seen, it's the greatest work of his career. It's just mind blowing.
Yeah, I need to thank you for contacting Pat for me. He did a variant cover for my comic. I love Pat's work. He's one of my first favorite comic book artists. So good, so good.
Yeah, and it's astonishing to see somebody at his age keep getting better and better.
I met him. I felt like I met Sam Elliott. He's like the coolest guy. He's had his cowboy hat. He's sitting there drinking, talking. I was like, oh my God, I couldn't even talk. And for me, that says something. He was the coolest guy. Captain Nemo. I kind of fascinate with Captain Nemo because I people kind of forget that he was an Indian prince. He grew up in wealth. He rejected it all, and people kind of make him like as a terrorist or a nihilist, but he's not any of that. How would you describe Captain Nemo?
He's an idealist.
Yeah.
And also a great inventor. When you look at the Nautilus, it goes without saying that it's nuclear powered. He says, well, I have an electric energy source that we can circle the world without coming up.
Yeah.
What else could it be? As far as his method of achieving world peace, I think he's a little insane there. I mean, it would never work. But this story gives him a chance to show what he can do to prevent war when the threat comes from somebody who's crazier than he is.
Yeah. I love Captain Nemo, but I was always like, he's basically kidnapping people.
Oh, yeah. And when he gets Holmes and Watson on board, he says, once aboard, you're never going to leave. But then he and Holmes forge a relationship, and Holmes is bored, and he can't get any cocaine. And Nemo points to his library, which is like 12 feet high, all books, and says, read some books. He says, "What do I read?" And Nemo hands him Edgar Allan Poe, which he'd never read before, and it just enthralls him.
There's no underwater cocaine for him because Nemo made underwater cigars out of seaweed.
Well, my question is that when I read a lot of your work, I find that you delve a lot into character development, and it's a slow burn a lot of the time, but it's certainly there in the background. But you have these characters which are iconic, obviously, and you dealt with iconic before. But are you going to develop the characters in your own way and start from the original source material and go in a different direction, or are you just going to stick with the fundamentals of the characters and tell a good story and leave it at that?
Well, I'm not going to alter their personalities or what makes them tick. Uh, I can work with their personalities are idiosyncratic enough to be fascinating in and of themselves, and that's what I work with. What I hope to do is to make the story fresh, and I think that people read it will see that it is fresh. I don't like wasting a word or a picture on anything. I want everything to push the story forward, not at a breakneck pace, but at a human pace, because a story needs time to breathe. It's not all exposition. It's also character development and what they do when they take a break, and that's in there too. But there's nothing in the book that does not add to the story. Once you understand story, and it took me a long time to get there, but I reached it. Uh, you don't make a wrong turn. Uh, and there are books that I would like to claw back that I wrote 40 years ago. But for the past 20 years, I've been happy with my work. I send it out. I don't worry whether it's any good or not. I know that it is. And if it's not a home run, I don't release it.
When you were a kid, did you want to be a comic book writer? Like, was this something that you always wanted to do?
I wanted to be a writer. I was in love with comics ever since I picked up my first Uncle Scrooge. And I recognized that. I was reading those books and I recognized that they were extraordinary. And I was right, because when you get into the vast bulk of comics, they're not very good. That's Sturgeon's Law.
Right.
Theodore Sturgeon. Yeah, I've mentioned it before. Sturgeon's Law is 90% of everything is crap.
Right.
And he's right. 90% of movies are crap, 90% of the TV shows are crap, and 90% of comics are crap. It's that 10% we want.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so embarrassed that I finally broke down and got the Uncle Scrooge big old collection. I gotta read that. But everybody I talk to, they say that that's like the guy who invented the language of comic book. Chuck Dixon cannot stop talking about how good it is. So I feel it's like my duty to read that.
Everybody should read Carl Barks.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I got to. Matter of fact, I guess I got no excuse but to read it this weekend. Read them this weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody said, who's a better detective, Sherlock Holmes or Detective Chimp?
Sherlock Holmes.
We also got a question. I guess it's for Mike. Who do you think that Batman or Sherlock Holmes is a better detective?
Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, Batman doesn't do detective work anymore. It's been
not anymore. No.
I know RJ and I talk about this a lot, but like I always say that there's like four Batmans. There's Golden Age, there's Silver Age, there's Detective Batman, like the Denny O'Neil, Chuck Dixon, and now there's Bat-God. And the only one I like is Detective Batman. So
yeah, I talked about that last week with Jim Apparo's Batman is my Batman, and that's where he is the detective.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. I like a good detective story. So Mike, I'd like to do a detective story, but I don't consider myself smart enough. Do you have any advice on how to write a good detective story?
Well, I have a series. I'm working on my 11th biker novel right now, and Josh Pratt is a licensed private investigator, but he's no genius. I mean, he gets results other ways by dogged hard work. And
that ain't gonna happen with me. So I'm screwed either way now.
But I mean, there are so many types of detectives. There's the super brainy type like Sherlock Holmes. There's Philip Marlowe, Raymond Chandler's great creation, which kind of forged a hard-boiled detective archetype that we worship today.
Yeah.
And they come in all shapes and sizes. Then there was Monk, who was an obsessive compulsive.
What do you think about something like Frank Miller's Sin City, where his sort of detectives that he developed in those kinds of circumstances? Would you think of those as detectives at all, or just a genre interpretation?
Oh, I'd have to read them again, but I think that's pretty much a genre interpretation, that Frank was taking all the archetypes and tropes of the characters and jamming them into a story, which is notable mostly for his art. Now, I really thought his writing was terrific on Daredevil and The Dark Knight Returns, but other than that, I think it's been spotty. Oh yeah, RJ mentions Michael Connolly, who's Detective Bosch. He's no great genius, but he's so thorough, and his understanding of the law and human nature is so great.
Is that recent television show?
The television show is probably the best detective show that's ever been done on TV.
Really?
Because it's based on a novel, one of Connolly's novels. And when you base a season on a really good novel, you can't go wrong. You watch TV that's created just for TV, and a lot of it's just crap and wasted time and talking heads. But that's not the case when you base a series on a great novelist.
I'm trying to.
I honestly think that Bosch sorry, John, but I honestly think that Bosch is very close to the true crime series that a lot of people are getting into. And we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, John, that a lot of female readers are looking for as well. That Bosch is probably, in my estimation, the closest thing you could get to that and still be fiction.
Yeah, I admire Connolly tremendously. And one of the reasons is that you don't even notice his narrative voice when you're reading the book. You're so immersed in what happens. The events present themselves as naturally as possible so that you're living the story.
Wow. I got to check this out because, I thought that the pinnacle of detective shows was Blue's Clues. So I've been watching that. Now, the last detective show was Columbo. I used to watch that with my dad. I got to go back and watch that. Now I got to watch Bosch.
I honestly never really, I always wanted to watch and like Columbo. It just never appealed to me. I'm much more of a Magnum PI and even Rockford Files kind of person.
Rockford Files is awesome too. He's just so charismatic. He's just a cool guy. Yeah, wouldn't you want to hang out with him, Jim Rockford? Out of all of the TV people, he's pretty cool. Oh man, now I'm excited, Bosch, because I don't watch TV anymore, Mike. I watch a TV show 3 episodes in, I'm lectured about how bad I am, and then I can't watch the show anymore.
I'm watching Cobra Kai right now.
Is it good?
Well, the characters are so wonderfully hissable, especially John Kreese. He's got to be the heaviest heavy that's ever traced across TV. It's a lot of fun. It's ridiculous, of course. It bears no relationship to reality, but the characters are beautifully defined, and it keeps on moving, and it coughs up one surprise after another. I enjoy it.
Oh, good. As long as they don't lecture me,
No.
That
No
is
lectures.
Full stop. Full stop. I'm done. Yeah. Yeah, cool. Now I got to watch that. I got 2 shows I can watch. Cool.
Oh, I can give you a big list. Do you get Netflix?
Yeah.
Have you seen The Last Kingdom?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Chuck Dixon recommended that. He does that. Ask Chuck Dixon every Wednesday. Yeah.
All right. Holmes or Lupin? I like Lupin. He's a good detective, but he's no Holmes.
I haven't thought about Lupin as a detective, but yeah.
Is that the manga character?
No, he's not. He's a French detective. He's a hero of a series of novels, and now he's a series of Netflix shows.
Oh, okay. Wow. You see, that's what I get for not watching too much TV anymore.
Yeah, I probably watch too much.
As long as you like it. Classic Kojak. Yeah. That was dirty old New York. You're absolutely right.
Who Loves You, Baby?
Yeah, Who Loves You, Baby?
I used to watch Hill Street Blues. That was a good show.
Yep. Yeah. Hill Street Blues. I remember that. Yeah. A lot of good shows.
Quincy was the one that always pulled me in. I don't know why. He wasn't quite a detective, but he did detective work.
I couldn't watch him because he was still Jack Klugman to me. I mean, he was still Oscar Madison to me. You know,
I got to answer geek. Geek, I don't read old pulp fiction much these days. I read some modern pulp fiction, but right now I'm reading Conclave, the novel about the papacy by Robert Harris, which is just released as a movie. And I'm reading Flyboys, an astonishing history book about the American war in the Pacific to defeat the Japan. It's an absolute mind blower. There are things in there that I never imagined when they talk about the destruction of the battles on both sides. When the United States firebombed Tokyo, they killed 100,000 people in a 124-hour period.
Yeah. They killed more people with traditional bombs than they did with the atomic bomb. And
that's true.
You know, and people still talk about the ethics of the atomic bomb. Killing them by firebombing is morally better. You know,
there's a really good series on YouTube where they interview basically the bombers, people who flew and people who were going back and forth with intelligence at the time, talking about the complete destruction. He talked about how they destroyed other cities with firebombs, hundreds and thousands of firebombs, and then they did the exact same thing to Nagasaki, and it just looked the exact same. And the description is horrific, but at the same time, a part of history that I don't think a lot of people really understand.
Well, one of the points the book made was that the Japanese has always been an authoritarian state and that has always worshipped the will of the warrior. And they repeatedly told everybody in Japan there will be no surrender. We will fight to the last man, even if it wipes out Japan. And that's why the United States used the atomic bomb.
Did you read that comic Storming Paradise by Chuck Dixon?
No.
But that's the premise, is what happens if we did a full-scale invasion rather than drop the bomb. And Chuck postulates that it would have been the end of Japan. There would have been so many deaths, there would have been so much revenge that the Japanese culture as we know it wouldn't even exist anymore.
I'll ask Chuck for copies.
There you go. Tell him, say, Chuck, give me some copies of your comic book.
I love Chuck's his take on war. I asked him when I interviewed him, and he said, if I had to write war comics for the rest of my life, I'd be fine.
Yeah. And he said, unfortunately, that's what Garth Ennis is doing. So he doesn't.
I've read a couple of scripts of his for upcoming Rippaverse titles that are about war, and they're great.
Is it set in the Rippaverse, or is this like?
No, it's set in the Rippaverse.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know that much lore about the Rippaverse, but then again, it's new, learning as we go. Shogun was good. I didn't watch the remake of Shogun.
It was terrific.
It was?
Oh yeah.
All that war with the Japanese and Germans, and they still don't use U.S. measurements. Oh, we got to bomb them harder next time. Does anybody really know what a centimeter is? Sounds like an insect.
Well, I know what it is, but I'm not going to use it. Thank you very much. We're Americans, damn it.
We're Americans, yeah. Damn it, we're going to use 5,280 feet in a mile.
I gotta say though, my brother's military, and he talks and clicks. You know, it's one click, two clicks.
Yeah, when I write military, I got to use metric.
But what is the definition of a click? I've been hearing it my whole life, and when I was a little
kilometer.
Kid, yeah, kilometer. It's short for kilometer. Now it's obvious. I told you I wasn't smart enough to write Detective Mike.
Incubus mentions the original Equalizer with Edward Woodward, which I watched and enjoyed. However, nothing compares to Denzel Washington's Equalizer, especially the first and third issues. I think it's the greatest vigilante movies ever made. I think they're brilliant. You want to know what a Punisher movie should look like? Watch The Equalizer.
Yeah.
That's high praise. When you hear that from Mike Barron.
Did you watch Reacher?
I watched the first series and I enjoyed it very much.
Yeah, I enjoyed that too, the first season. An old timer that I worked with who since passed gave me the book. So I was like, I got to watch the show in honor of him. You know, it was good.
Yeah, and then of course we remember the Tom Cruise Reacher movies where this midget comes out and says he's Jack Reacher. No.
No, he's not Reacher unless he has like prosthetic arms. That
Well, I like Tom Cruise. You know, I'm
I do. I like him too, but he's not Reacher.
no.
Tradition is beautiful. Metric is bland. Yeah, my wife is Canadian, and she gets mad that she tells me the temperature, and I'm like, "Oh, it's cold out." She goes, "No, that's Celsius." I'm like, "That's I don't know Celsius." So whenever I ask her what the temperature is, she has to tell me both in Fahrenheit and Celsius because,
You know it's cold outside when you go outside and it's cold.
well, yeah, well, I work outside. I got to know whether to bring out the thermal socks or not. Once I get to the
you have to be prepared. You're slogging through the mud and with the laying electrical pipe. You guys got a lot of snow there, don't you now?
No snow yet, but I'm surprised.
Where are you?
I'm in New York. I'm an electrician. I'm working at the JFK airport right now. They're building a new terminal.
Whether you know something, every major airport in the country is under constant construction that never ends.
Yeah, thank God, man. I'm trying to pay for my comic book collection.
What's that old joke? You can be applicable to so many situations. Be like the airport. Work on yourself constantly, no matter how much it inconveniences everyone else.
That's right.
Yeah. Comics ain't cheap. Overtime at the airport, man. It's like the Goodfellas Lufthansa heist, but it's legal. It's rough because the first thing that goes on is they got to dig all the holes for all the electrical pipes. That's where I am, me and my broken neck, and a hole filled up to my knees with water, freezing. My wife's telling me it's Celsius, and I'm like pissed off because that don't make sense to me.
Freezing is the reason for the season.
Tony Grigo says he hopes for a Mike Baron Flash omnibus one day.
Oh, it's been out, Tony. I have a copy.
There you go. That was fast.
Yeah, it came out a couple years ago.
I just say go to your local comic store, and well, that wouldn't help Mike out, but I just love floppies, so I bought those off the newsstand, so I'm good.
Yeah, I bought them when they came out. Yep. I look back, after meeting you and talking to you for the first time last year, Mike. I went back and I can't believe how many Mike Baron comics I actually have. From Badger to Nexus to Punisher. Mike's having so much fun. He's taking cyanide rather than continue this conversation with me.
I'm drinking. It's a vodka.
Incubus actually brings up a interesting point, which I've heard a number of times before. Is like, if you want to save Hollywood, take all of these aging out actors and make them into film noir detectives, or put them on a horse and set them off into the sunset, and you could just get movie after movie after movie out of them, and it would bring back Hollywood.
No. The most important element in any story is the writing. If you have a good script, nobody can kill a good script. It will shine through. But as far as these actors, we all have favorite actors that we like. I'd like to see them in a movie. I'm more disposed to see a movie if they're in it. But that is no a guarantee that it's going to be any good. What's the guarantee is in the story.
I agree completely, because most of the stories today are written by committee, and that's not a story. It just falls down at some point because there's too many competing voices, and it doesn't have an engine to drive it all the way into somebody's heart, basically, to make a connection.
That's true. I think that the best stories are the vision of one screenwriter, or occasionally two, as in the case of The Godfather, where Coppola teamed up with Mario Puzo to write that script, and in my opinion, the greatest movie ever made.
Well, I whenever I watch a movie, I'll forgive bad special effects. I'll even forgive like bad casting, but I will not forgive bad writing, because writing is it's a guy with a piece of paper. You know what I mean? You don't need special effects. You don't need a super budget. You just need a guy with talent. You know what I mean? And it's just unforgivable to see. Everything else I could say, like, okay, this they didn't get the set that they wanted, or this actor was too expensive, or whatever. But get the right script at the very bottom. I will not tolerate bad writing.
Yeah, me either. I've tried to watch some recent movies. I tried to watch Fast 10,
Well,
and
there you go.
it was such nonsense that I could only watch like the first 15 minutes because it was all this grandiose. It was like based on a Stan Lee comic almost, but it had no relationship to reality. You have these Dodge Chargers dragging around massive steel safes that must have weighed 20 tons apiece, and they're dragging them like they're little sleds or something. And I didn't buy that. If a story doesn't take itself seriously, I can't take it seriously, and that rules out so many shows I've seen recently, like Cocaine Bear. I heard that was coming. I thought, wow, what a great idea! Because I thought if they did it straight, if it was really scary movie about a bear that snorts up cocaine and goes after people, that's a terrific premise. But it was a horror comedy, which meant it was neither scary nor funny.
No, yeah, I agree with you. Bears are scary enough. Now just imagine a frothing at the mouth, raging monster. Yeah,
The bears are the apex predator that have been least well served by movies. The best bear movie is The Edge, which was written by David Mamet, which is one reason. It stars Anthony Hopkins and Alec Baldwin as romantic rivals whose plane gets knocked down in the middle of Alaska. And as they hike towards safety, this grizzly bear gets on their trail. And that's the scariest bear in any movie ever. And it's pretty scary, but it's no Jaws.
that's the joke that I heard that a park ranger said, if you're going on a hike, take bells in case you encounter a bear. They said, "Oh, really? How does that help?" He says, "Well, you ring the bell; it scares away the brown bears." And they said, "Well, what if it's a grizzly bear?" He goes, "Well, then we could find you from the bells and the poop."
I can't remember the collection of magazines. I had just bought a book. It was like at a yard sale or something recently, but it was Outdoor Life or something like that. And there was all these stories from the early 1900s, late 1800s. That's as far back as the magazine went. And there's ones about bears attacks and things like that. Like people actually surviving bear. It's horrific how much damage people can actually go through and a bear can inflict upon a person.
You know what? I forgot The Revenant.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's a terrific movie.
Tony has a question here. He wants to know your thoughts on what DC has done with Wally West in making him into a serial killer.
Really?
Tony, I have no idea. I haven't read a corporate comic in years. I can't really judge it. I suppose it's good writing could make it so. But in my experience, that's not the case. Maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I bought an issue of Captain America and an issue of Master of Kung Fu, and I read them, and neither contained any entertainment value whatsoever.
Yeah, I'm going on 10 years of just cold turkey Marvel and DC. I can't believe it's been that long. And here I am with Captain America and Green Lanterns and Nick Fury stuff. You know what I mean? I never thought I'd say the day I'm done with Marvel and DC, but they made it clear that they didn't want us. What would you do to expand your readership? Would you insult your audience, or would you?
You never insult your audience.
Right.
I believe that story is the main element. So I try to write stories that are gripping, that you can't put down. The essential question in fiction is what happens next, because if the reader doesn't care, he's not going to turn the page. So I tried to craft a story that's as engrossing as possible. I want the reader to immerse himself in my writing so completely that when his wife comes in and says, "Honey, it's dinner time," he says, "Not now, not now."
You said this, and I've been quoting you, and you were talking about like what can we do to get the crowdfunded scene big, how can we make it popular, and you just said write good stories. And I remember like everybody, I wasn't on it, I was watching a panel, and everybody else kind of was just like, yeah, but what can we do besides that?
It's a visual medium, and it doesn't hurt to have great art.
Right.
But we've all read hundreds of comics with great art and shit stories.
Yeah, just look at Image.
Yeah, unfortunately, I read too many of them. Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm gonna flatter myself. Now that I have a comic book out, I can say I'm a writer, and I like story. I like this. Like, I'll look at your comic, but I won't get issue number 2 if the story's no good. You know, and I absolutely 100% agree with you. To get good stories, get good, because there are phenomenal artists in this indie scene. There are, but I just think that there's unfortunately not a lot of great writers. There's some good ones, but we need the Watchmen or the Dark Knight Returns of the indie scene, to get people excited. And
On that note, Tony also asked the questions. Do you think you'll ever return to writing Frank Castle proper?
Me? Oh no, I'll never return. They're never going to contact me for any writing. But do I think that Frank Castle will return to his roots the way I wrote him? No, not in a million years. They destroyed Frank Castle. That's why I created Private American. And if you miss the old Punisher, you want Private American. It's available at my website, baroncomics.com. It's everything the Punisher should be, but isn't.
Yep.
Well, Tony also asked the question. I didn't actually know about this. He asked, what happened to the Nexus cartoon that was announced years ago?
Well, dude financed that, and he put together a 3-minute animation at his own expense, and it's lovely to look at. It's kind of Hanna-Barbera-ish. There's no real story there. It's just a series of events. I don't see any Nexus animation on the horizon. Though the dude swears that he'll never die, he'll never give up until it happens. But it seems unlikely at this point that it's ever going to happen. That doesn't rule out a movie, because Mike Richardson is still committed to making a Nexus movie. I would love to see it happen, but I'm not holding my breath.
That would be awesome. Yeah, Nexus. I was just talking about this. Dave Sandberg. I just had a talk with him, and he has a comic called Jupiter. And I said, your comic like Nexus, there's totally unique. There's nothing like Nexus. I'm rereading it now because I love it so much.
Well, that's true about Jupiter as well.
Yeah, it is. It's so different.
Unfortunately, I think one of the main problems with trying to take such a property and turn it into a movie is when they try to concentrate on the world building more than the story itself, and it just gets lost. The story gets lost within the world building.
Well, that's because there's 120 issues of Nexus, and the first 100 issues had contained more than enough material for a dozen feature-length films.
Yeah, do you think that that's a rookie mistake, doing just world building the comic? I know that was my first temptation with my first script.
Well, I don't mind a skilled screenwriter coming in because producers are going to feel a lot better if somebody with a track record is writing it. And they do have a guy with a track record who's written a script. But if you want a solid story, as I said with Bosch and Michael Connolly, all you have to do is look at the stories that I wrote and adapt those.
Cool. Yeah.
I always, when I think about detective stories and more of a set up a mystery in my head, anyways, my background is legal work, and I do a lot of legal research and created a company around that. But I go too far into the intricate, into the very small minutia of wanting to see the very little logical steps of how things progress. And to me, quite honestly, that's why I kind of like Sherlock Holmes. He goes in that direction at the very least in a lot of the stories and a lot of the different stories that people have, done new versions of him for. But is that something that you think is necessary? There's so many different kinds of detective stories, so I suppose it's not necessary. But for Sherlock Holmes, I would say it's necessary. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it depends on the writing. A good writer can take a person anywhere. He can convince a person that anything is possible. It just all depends on the writing. An unskilled writer will get buried in minutiae and won't have the sense to say, this is boring or it's too much. Uh, it just depends on the writer. You have to get a feel for that sort of thing. And by that, I mean understanding what constitutes story. Well, what constitutes story? There's a million different things. There's character, there's setting, there's the narrative voice. Uh, there's which is the style in which you write. I mean, some people read authors just because they love the style, like Michael Chabon, who wrote The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. He's somebody with a unique style that people enjoy. And so is James Ellroy, who wrote L.A. Confidential, is the complete opposite of Chabon, in that Elroy writes like a machine gun, short declarative sentences, one after the other, bam, bam, bam. He's also very funny when he wants to be. Alas, I think that he peaked back in the 90s with LA Confidential and The Big Nowhere, and that his material since then has been, even though the sentences are short, the books are long, and the plots are labyrinthine, so much so that I haven't been able to make sense of them. And it's too bad because I think he's a great writer. And if you want to experience Elroy at his best, there's a book called Destination Morgue, which is a collection of short stories and essays he wrote, which is unputdownable.
And just to break in, I want to let everybody in the chat know that the link is in the description, both for Mike's page, which I'm showing right now, which links to Indiegogo, Fund My Comic, and Kickstarter for his Sherlock Holmes books that we're showing.
Thank you.
And here, I'll put the link again for baroncomics.com. Mike, you said that when you were a kid, you were in the Irregulars. So what did that mean? Did you have like a slingshot in your back pocket?
No, the Baker Street Irregulars. That's what Holmes called the gang of ragamuffins that he would sometimes ask to go out and patrol the streets and bring back any news for him. And that's what we called our little literary group.
Oh, I was picturing you solving crimes, like with
Encyclopedia Brown.
Lucy Van Pelt, put a quarter in the box and Mike goes out and solves your crimes.
The only crime I ever solved was one day I saw a guy stealing a bicycle from the trunk of a car. Ooh. So I followed him and saw him put it in another car, and I wrote the license plate down, and then I called the police.
There you go. Wearing a cape, solving the bicycle. That was the case of the pilfered bicycle. Yeah, I'm trying to think.
A long time ago.
So, Encyclopedia Brown. I don't know. I just pictured you with like a pipe that blew bubbles, like a little kid solving crime. So, who's the better detective, Holmes, Nero, Wolfe, or Hercule Poirot?
I do admire Nero Wolfe a great deal, and I've read many of his books. Rex Stout, of course. And I have to say that every book contains an excellent recipe, but Holmes is the better detective. Holmes is the greatest detective the world has ever seen. Of course, it's fiction, and you can argue until the cows come home, and I'm just saying that's only my opinion. Other people may choose another detective. And then there's the whole branch of hard-boiled detectives that include Philip Marlowe and the Continental Op. That's another way to go. And they're thinkers too. If you read the Continental Op or Marlowe, he does some deducing. He has to do it, but not on Holmes' level. It's more about the personality and Raymond Chandler's narrative voice. Which is unique. I think the appeal of those Philip Marlowe novels is as much the language as the story is. As Chandler wrote stuff like, he was about as inconspicuous as a tarantula on angel food. And from 20 feet, she looked like $1 million. From 10 feet, she looked like a woman who was designed to be seen from 20 feet.
I always, when you think about too complicated stories, to me, it's the difference between something like The Maltese Falcon and The Big Sleep. The Big Sleep, I think, is just a bit too complex for most people to actually follow all the threads through.
Well, he doesn't even solve the crimes.
Right. And I also don't think Chandler had an ending to that. It was all style and no substance.
I got distracted by the beautiful women in that movie. You
Yeah,
know?
of course, as you're supposed to.
Oh man! And then like it was like 20 years. I'm like, wait a minute, they never actually solved the murder. And
No, no, and the Maltese Falcon is a masterpiece.
I saw that for the first time in a movie theater. They restored a movie theater in I think it was Huntington, and it had like velvet seats and everything like that. The ushers wore like the old double-breasted suits, and I was like, I'm gonna go see them because I think it was the 50th anniversary, which was in the 90s. That's how long ago it was, and I was like amazed by how good it was. That started a whole love of all black and white movies.
Oh well, yeah. Well, I mean, Maltese Falcon is one of the best of all the film noirs, and of course, it was written by Dashiell Hammett, who was himself a Pinkerton detective, which gave him insight into his stories as a modern writer. Trying to think of his name, who wrote a book called Hammett. I'll tell you who it is, and he's a terrific writer, who is also a private detective.
I never actually, I don't know, maybe I'm just a bit slow on this point, but I watched, a lot of film noir growing up. But when I started to write again, the Fade to Blue, which is based upon almost a film noir style because I want to do it in black and white, I never actually realized that one of the essential elements of film noir is the fact that it has no supernatural elements in it whatsoever. And to me, that seems like a breaking point that a lot of people just, it's the difference between a film noir or something like, Indiana Jones, right? So I don't think that film noir is the way that a lot of people want to go today, but they want to go that way in the genre and the feel of it, but still they want more of the supernatural element to be at the very least accessible to. Maybe that's what's going on. I don't know.
Well, I love film noir. In fact, I'm working on a film noir graphic novel now with a terrific illustrator. I wish I could tell you about it, but it's still undercover. The author I was trying to think of was Joe Gores, who wrote many terrific novels. And one of his last was Spade and Archer, which was a prequel to the Maltese Falcon, and is just brilliant. He nailed Hammett's style. He also wrote a novel called Hammett, which was made into a movie, which is terrific. I am a big fan of Steve Ditko's Mr. A.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, Steve Ditko's Mr. I remember reading that and just like, oh my God, this guy's just letting the criminal burn to death. and Mr. A says to the little girl he's rescuing, he is suffering the consequences of his own actions. I don't have to save him. I was like, there you go, Steve.
Well, film noir is noticeable most importantly for its bleak view of human existence and its cynical outlook. I think that Nightmare Alley is a masterpiece, both the original novel, the original movie, and the remake, which stars what is that guy's name? Well, anyhow, and no, hang on a second here.
It's good to see other people can't remember. I thought I was just me. Makes me feel like a part of a club. Mike Barron can't remember names either. I'm not bad.
I honestly, well, I can't remember if the name of the original film was Kidnapped or not, but one of the great things about film noir and the way that they tell the story is a lot to do with what you see within comics and panel setup, is the fact that a lot of it doesn't put the action on screen, and it doesn't, it is basically having murders right off to the side, so you're not looking straight at it. Now maybe that was just because of the censorship at the time within the the 30s and stuff like that, but to me that heightens the idea of the mystery in a way that is atmospheric and again harkens back to like sequential art.
The movie I'm thinking of stars Bradley Cooper and was directed by Guillermo del Toro.
I love Del Toro.
Well, you should see this Nightmare Alley. I think it's excellent. I think
Yeah.
it's his best movie in years.
RJ, I heard, maybe Mike, maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard that film noir arose out of like to make cheap movies.
I doubt that.
Oh, really? Because all the lights, everything like that. So they had a low budget and then just use the lighting and your imagination and keeping things off the camera.
Well, that would explain to me my connection. I think, John, you just hit the nail on the head. I hadn't thought of that. But it's like Will Eisner says in his books about the fact that the closest thing to a stage play is a comic book because you can use lighting in the exact same way to spotlight something, whereas you don't really get the same impact within a movie or a novel or anything else. So that, yeah, exactly. Because, film noir is black and white and it's meant to be black and white. And even when they try to recreate it, it's usually in black and white.
You don't want
the use of...
You don't want Ted Turner to colorize the Maltese Falcon?
No, thank you. But it's the use of that light. It's use of the lighting and the shade, again, that Eisner talks about as a stage play use of the visual.
Hey, Mike, RJ just made me think of something. How do you feel about this? Comic books supposed to be, or I guess supposed to be is a bad term. Comic books like more theatrical or more cinematic? Do you think?
Comics are a unique medium, but they are a visual medium. I can't. They should be theatrical and cinematic, but it depends on the story.
Yeah, because I always thought of them as more theatrical, especially like when you read like Daredevil, Born Again, or Batman. Even the Batman, Frank Miller's, what was it, Year One. Like I kind of thought of it as a stage play, and then Mark Millar comes in with the Ultimates, and that is more cinematic. I don't know, but I think my Bronze Age, my comics that I love from the Bronze Age, always seem to be like more cinema than widescreen movies. I don't know.
I honestly think, John, I know I might get crucified in the comments for this, but I think that what you're tugging at in my mind is that it's an American medium. I'm sorry, but it is. To me, comics are an American medium, and it just comes out of the American mindset and the love for film, and that love for film does show itself within, so many different aspects within stage plays and comic books and the way the stories are written. To me, comics are an American medium.
Mike, what do you think about the 80s and 90s, like the British invasions, like the Warren Ellis and Alan Moore's and Grant Morris?
Well, I enjoyed Alan Moore's Watchmen very much.
Yeah, me too. I'm a big fan. I know right now it's cool to hate on Alan Moore, but I don't know. Like I always say, the crazy to hot ratio with women, like you'll put up with the crazy girl if she's hot. Like Alan Moore is kind of crazy, but I enjoy the hell out of his stories. So he can be crazy as far as I'm concerned.
I just want to answer Mike's question for myself anyways. I don't know. I wouldn't put Casablanca in film noir just because it's so much romance in it.
Well, I would. I think it's got one foot in film noir. Film noir is a big tent. Guys, my eyelids are getting heavy.
Yeah, you're noping out. I can see.
Well, we usually cut it off at 1 hour, and I was just about to tell you that, Mike, because leave them wanting more. That's always what we do. So, quick reminder to everyone that links are in the description for Mike's Twitter and his website and the website you're looking at right now, where there are 3 links for Indiegogo, Fund My Comic, and Kickstarter to go and order copies of Leviathan, which is the story we are talking about here tonight. And if you want to do so, please do so through the link, and that way you can get Mike's book quicker and you don't have to go search for it. Any last words, Mike, about Leviathan before we go?
Well, it's a great book, and you're going to love it. That's all I can say. I can say that with confidence. I don't know if many creators can, but as I say, I don't let anything out of the house unless it's a home run. This is a home run.
Yeah, I can't wait. It looks great.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I can't wait. But then again, your books are instant buys for me anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll leave it at that. And thank you very much for coming on, Mike, and sharing your book with us. And I want to thank everyone in the chat who showed up tonight and everyone who will show up. Don't forget to take a look at Mike's book, and I will see y'all later.
Thanks, guys.
Good seeing you again, Mike. See you Friday.
Yep.